There's players that we avoid every year. So we're telling you who we are avoiding in 2023 and who we're targeting instead. So let's get right into it. I'm avoiding Deebo Samuel. Let me tell you why, because Bob asked, kind of, by setting up the show sheet. He's never played a full season in his career, and I feel like we are always going to be chasing the 2021 Deebo Samuel, much like NFL teams were constantly chasing the 2017 Carson Wentz. You saw the glimmer of what could be, and I don't think it happens again. In that season, 77 catches for 1,405 yards and 6 touchdowns, 59 carries for 365 yards and 8 touchdowns. It's going to be hard to see again, given that Brandon Ayuk did emerge last year, 78 catches, 1,015 yards and 8 touchdowns. We've got an unstable quarterback room too. So there's a lot of questions. If it's I'm staying away from the quarterback room, maybe we could almost apply it to the wide receiver room in San Francisco as well. It's hard for me to see any one of the quarterbacks in the room supporting 2 top wide receivers. Has Sam Darnold ever done it in his career that you guys remember? We don't know if Brock Purdy can do it because he was just more of kind of a game manager in the regular season last year. And we haven't seen Trey Lance really at all. So if he wasn't getting air yards, he was getting it done on the ground. Christian McCaffrey's there. It's going to make it hard to get rushing yards with CMC there because why would you give the ball to Deebo at CMC? So he's currently going at wide receiver 19, DLF, and wide receiver 27 on keep trade cut. He's also going ahead of his teammate Brandon Ayuk, Treylon Burks, Jerry Jeudy, and Terry McLaurin. Those are wide receivers 28, 24, 17, and 24 respectively. And he's costing you a 24 first-round pick. So he's not cheap, and I think he could be a declining asset. If you own Deebo Samuel, I'm sure you're hoping I'm wrong. I'm going to take Terry McLaurin, wide receiver 24 instead. Let me tell you why. He's steady Eddie. His floor is like 1,000 yards, 5 touchdowns. Kind of like, you know how when you put Mike Evans into your lineup, you feel pretty good about it, right? Terry McLaurin's in there. He might not be the biggest ceiling guy, but he's going to be steady for you. He's only missed 3 games in his entire career too, which is pretty impressive. He appears to be quarterback proof. Washington, they've had the revolving door and over 1,000 yards every year except his rookie season, which is still a good season. 58 catches for 919 yards and 7 touchdowns. You can't complain about that as a rookie. He's got a safe floor. Solid wide receiver 2. And like I said, 1,000 yards, 5 touchdowns is his floor. It's going to be a reliable target for a younger quarterback in Sam Howell. And, you could trade if you have Deebo Samuel. You could get him and plus assets. You could trade his value on DLF Straight Analyzer is 369.9. So you could get him or you could give Deebo and get McLaurin in a 24 second. That's 339.2. So there's going to be good value there in the second round of next year's draft as well. And you get a very good wide receiver on top of it. So I'm not trusting Deebo. Moving on from him, grabbing some scary Terry. Chev, what about you, my friend?
Yeah, and I chose a guy that I just don't want anymore. A guy that makes me super nervous in fantasy football, and it's going to be Alvin Kamara. This guy in 2023, we have no idea if he'll even be playing this upcoming season. We know a suspension is going to be hitting him at some point, we imagine, with everything that's going on with him. And also they added Jamal Williams and Kendrick Miller. And, those 2 guys are good running backs. Jamal Williams led the league in touchdowns last year. Kendrick Miller is a guy that we loved on the Dynasty Rewind, a guy that can just do it all, a guy that can read holes, and he can take it to the crib. So I think Kendrick Miller can do a lot of what Alvin Kamara can do. And, if he does miss some time due to suspension, Kendrick Miller is going to benefit from that. But I just think those 2 are going to cut into his workload, and, those TDs are not going to be the same as it used to be. And, we saw a little degress in his stats as well this last year. Expectations for Alvin Kamara, I'm really not expecting him to be an RB1. I mean, he may miss out on being an RB2 this upcoming year, just with those guys there and with the suspension looming. I just don't see the touches for him in this upcoming season that's going to get him to be the running back that we're used to seeing Alvin Kamara be. And I just don't feel confident in what's going on there for him to just get that workload anymore. The running backs I would rather have Joe Mixon and Dalvin Cook at this point. Those are 2 running backs that are somewhat close in age with him and somewhat close in value. I just think both of those running backs are going to get more opportunity in the run game. It just seems to me that those guys get the touches in both atmospheres. They get in receiving and rushing. That's why I think they will outproduce him. and just be better for you in 2023. I know Mixon's been an absolute circus this last year in the offseason, but I still think he's going to be a running back there as long as he doesn't get into any more trouble and that no suspensions are given to him. I haven't heard much about that, but Joe Mixon's a guy that I still think has a lot of potential, especially in the Bengals offense. And I just do not believe in Alvin Kamara anymore, especially with what they did this last offseason, getting all these running backs. So, the cost for these two running backs, Joe Mixon and Dalvin Cook, you're looking at giving up a second or a late first for either, especially with Joe Mixon. It seems like everybody's value has dropped on him last season, even though he was an RB1. And Dalvin Cook was a really high-end RB2 last season. And I don't think it really matters what team he goes to. I think he's still going to hold value. I still think he's going to get work in the passing game. If anything, him going to the Bills could help him a little bit. They could get up a lot in games, and he could just finish off the game rushing the football. So those are two guys that I'd rather have than Alvin Kamara in 2023.
The competition isn't there for Mixon like it is for Kamara, right?
Yeah, okay. There really isn't anybody except Chase Brown at this point. They really didn't do much to solidify that running back room, even though we had seen the off the field issues this last offseason.
Bob, I'm going to disagree with you on this next one, but I'm going to let you make your case first. Who are you avoiding this year?
This is purely out of the aspect of you're looking for wide receivers you want to go add to your team. Mm-hmm. And the reason I don't want to buy this player, who is Devonta Smith, I think we've seen the peak of his production. I don't see him improving upon what he did last year going forward. I think the problem is you're paying that to get him, to have him on your roster. And I'd rather look elsewhere for more potential, spending a little less possibly even, and having that further potential on top of what I think is just going to be a perennial wide receiver 2. So I think, like I said, perennial wide receiver 2, but he's going to cost you someone like DK Metcalf or Deebo Samuel plus a 24-second, which I think a fair amount of people would pay. And I think that's reasonably fair too. I don't think that's a terrible, transition to go get him. I think that's actually pretty reasonable. Or Jahan Dotson and a 24 first, which I'm not going to pay because I like the Jahan Dotson quite a bit. And I think with that 24 first, I'm very happy with what I can do with that going forward, looking ahead at that class a little bit. So I don't hate the cost, but if that's the price I have to pay, I'd rather go and get someone like Jackson Smith and Jigba, a wide receiver, rookie wide receiver, my favorite player in this draft class, even over Bijan. Not necessarily the best player grading wise and all the things, but my favorite player. Younger option, which in my opinion has more potential to be a wide receiver 1 in an offense, which doesn't always translate to more fantasy points than a wide receiver 2 in another offense. They got a new offense coordinator coming to town, Shane Waldron from the Los Angeles Rams, after being the passing game coordinator since 2018. And it's rumored that this offense, and it makes sense with the drafting of a very high wide receiver, is going to start transitioning into a lot more 3 wide receiver sets. And it's easy to draw parallels from the famous 3 wide receiver set that was Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, and Brandon Cooks to the projected 3 wide receiver set in Seattle being Metcalf, Lockett, and JSN. We know JSN loves a slot. Who else loved the slot in that grouping? Cooper Kupp. I'm not saying he's going to be Cooper Kupp. That's not what I'm saying, but there is a possibility he's featured to the level that Cooper Kupp was, and we know that the slot is valuable in fantasy football. People like to diss on it, but the slot is an extremely valuable position in today's NFL, especially the teams that utilize the middle of the field very well. And he'll be able to get in a lot of space, be a PPR magnet and things like that. But looking at expectations going forward, I'm going to give Devonta Smith the edge this year because I do think that there is somewhat of a transition of JSN just getting acclimated to the offense. Like you should have the expectation for any rookie. But over time, beyond 2023, I believe we can see JSN rise to not only be the wide receiver 1 on his own team, but a wide receiver 1 in fantasy and one we discuss in similar tiers to somebody like Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson next offseason, and if not even higher than those two next offseason. Smith just doesn't have that realistic upside to me. Now, before I go any further, I think that Devonta Smith, I don't want to seem like I'm trashing the guy. I think if you're interested, I think you're going to be able to get him for a much better price next offseason. And I don't know that it's going to be crazy better, but I think the expectation will go from, oh, wow, this can be a wide receiver 1 in this high-powered offense to, okay, he's probably just going to be a wide receiver 2 in this high-powered offense, which is still valuable. But going back to JSN and moving this thing along, if you want JSN, it's going to cost you, as it should. The team that just drafted him in their rookie drafts isn't just going to give him away. You're starting with a 24 first and then adding likely one of these sophomore wide receivers from last year, George Pickens, Treylon Burks, Jamison Williams. I'm more than happy moving any of those with the 24 first to go get JSN. But if I had JSN, I'm not even thinking about those offers. You need somebody like Jahan Dotson with that 24 first for me to even think about it. And that is maybe me being unrealistically high on JSN, but I think those are kind of the prices you're going to have to pay. I think there are a lot of people that are still sleeping on JSN, and I think his value is going to go up pretty quickly. And, like I said, if you're thinking about targeting Devonta Smith, maybe go see what you can do, knock on some doors, see what you can get for JSN or see what it takes to get JSN instead, because I think long-term, that's going to win out over time.
I could tell you one thing, and that's I'm avoiding Austin Eckler this year. So this is not a bad thing. Just want to point out there, he was not happy with his contract, but he is staying in LA. I believe he had some incentives added. I don't think they actually gave him any more guaranteed money. It was just all incentive based. It's going to be a free agent after the season and 28 years old. Fun fact on Austin Eckler, he's never rushed for 1,000 yards in his career. He hasn't needed to. Let's be real. He's been so good through the air. He does have 1,200 career touches, so he's seen a lot of work. And while the backs behind him aren't anything special, they are all Los Angeles Chargers draft picks, and that's Joshua Kelly, Isaiah Spiller, and Larry Roundtree. There's other guys. These are the guys of note that will actually get the ball. So he did finish last season as the running back one. You're going to have to pay accordingly, even though we know the drop-off is going to come. If you want to acquire Austin Eckler, you have to pay up. Okay, so he's currently running back 11 on both DLF and Keep Trade Cut. And right now, like a fair value for him, I have a 24 first and a third. So I'm looking at the players being taken below him. There's one guy in particular I want, but I just want to mention some other guys that I'd rather have, and you could get plus value on top of them. There's a bevy of them. Miles Sanders, Damian Pierce, Dalvin Cook, and David Montgomery. They're going to be productive. And like I said, you'll get plus assets. Mostly, I'm looking at Javonte Williams. I believe he's being avoided later on, and we'll get into that. Why? Glad you asked. Reports are he's looking good in OTAs to this point. I guess the lucky thing is he got hurt early enough in the year that he's going to be able to make a comeback. And I want a running back that's in a Sean Payton system. I do. He's shown time and time again that his system can support two running backs. We've seen it with Kamara, and then just all these other guys like Latavius Murray was relevant. Mark Ingram was relevant. And by the way, give me all the Greg Dulcich you can as well. So looking at some of the aging running backs that finished as running back ones last year, okay, I think Javonte Williams can make a push if healthy, because we could see guys like Aaron Jones, Tony Pollard, Jamal Williams, Joe Mixon, and Dalvin Cook. They could all taper off a little bit, and that's going to allow him to move up the ranks. You could get Javonte Williams for a single 24 first. He's coming off an injury, yes, but I'd rather put my faith in a younger running back. Now, Bob is going to crap all over what I just said. That's fine. Go ahead. Who are you avoiding?
Yeah, so I'm not only avoiding the player that you said you'd rather target in the last segment. I'm avoiding Javonte Williams and Breece Hall, both for similar reasons. Now, we have enough of a track record of running backs coming back from ACL tears that just don't pan out. It's a very short list of the ones that have. It's Adrian Peterson, and I believe Jamal Charles is the other one that have bounced back year one after an ACL tear. Everybody else has been dog water the following year, or at least significantly worse than they were previously before the injury. So if you want to talk about like long-term plans, like you're not trying to compete in 23, you're looking at 24, and you want to possibly buy low on some of these guys now, I think there's a discussion to be had. But if, let's say, you were looking at Austin Eckler or a running back that's going to help you this year, I'd much rather look elsewhere, because I don't trust Javonte, especially because there was a lot of fairly well documented, but probably not well enough documented press that there was like nerve damage and rough healing and things like that, similar to how J.K. Dobbins had with his injury, that there was more than just the ACL tear that was involved. There were other ligaments in there and things like that. So there's a lot more damage there, and I think he's much more susceptible to being less than good this year. So we have enough of that track record, but I'm still just avoiding adding these guys. And I put this on here because I saw you said you'd rather have Javonte Williams, and I'm like, can't let that slide. Sorry, Mike. So with Breece Hall, you're still paying top flight prices to acquire him, and I don't think you'll see a return on that investment this season. I'd rather wait for the down year dip and buy later. Right now, he's costing you Chris Olave or multiple first-round picks. Just can't do it. Just don't want to do it. Whereas Javonte, significantly cheaper, makes a little more sense, I guess. Didn't pop off enough, I think, for people to realize, like, hey, this guy is good in the NFL. But he was still running back 2 and 3 for a good part of the offseason last year. So you're paying a future first for him. You were right on with that cost. Or Treylon Burks is somebody else who's in that similar wheelhouse. Don't hate the cost, but the expectation for this year is low for me. So I would rather have, for Breece Hall, if I'm paying the same price, just about 90 points this year, why not go after Jonathan Taylor? I'd much rather be involved in that offense, a significant workload coming his way. That offense is going to be powered around the run, because I don't know that Anthony Richardson is going to be developed enough to be a passer yet. So they're going to have to lean on the run. As opposed to Javonte Williams, I might have to pay a little bit more than I would for Javonte, but I'm more willing to do so to add Ramondre Stevenson to my competitive roster. Another guy who I think is going to get significant workload, prove that he can be involved in the run and the pass, catching 69 passes last year. Nice. The most on his team for the record. Both of these running backs locked into featured roles in their respective backfields on teams that will more likely favor the run game this year, because their passing attacks probably just don't have it this year. It happens. For expectation, both of these running backs are all but locked into running back 1 levels of production, in my opinion. Where they land on that chart, I think RB12 is like the floor for both of these guys. I think Jonathan Taylor, with his volume and skill set, can probably be a top 5. Ramondre, I think top 8 isn't anywhere near out of the question, especially in PPR leagues where he has a significantly higher ceiling. Cost for these guys, if you're going to go get Jonathan Taylor in Superflex, you're paying a 24 first plus Deebo Samuel or someone like Travis Etienne. More than happy paying that price. I think Jonathan Taylor's a little easier to acquire than he probably should be right now. I don't think you're buying low, but I think he's accessible after an injury last season. For Ramondre, you're paying that same 24 first you were going to go pay for Javonte to go get Ramondre, or you're paying Michael Pittman or Deebo Samuel. So trade out your wide receiver for an upgrade at running back. Those are all just fair aligned values and moves I'm making to go try to get these players on my rosters at better value. And like I said, avoid that ACL follow-up year, because every year we have enough evidence now, and I think we're just going to keep mounting evidence that these players are not going to be good the year after, especially when Javonte I can like a little bit more than Breece Hall, because you are already paying a significant dip in his value. Whereas Breece Hall, you're still paying astronomical numbers. You're paying numbers like he's going to be the running back 2 this year. Can't do it, won't do it. Go buy smarter, not harder. Make these smart moves in the offseason. Avoid silly injuries. Just avoid it when they're there, when the documentation's there. Follow the history a little bit.
I think it's just a little easier too for these guys to take it slow coming back as well. Like, the league has gone and switched it up to where you have 2 or 3 running backs now that you can trust, so you don't have to play these guys every second. Now I think it's a little different with these ACLs. Like, my expectations for anybody that has ACL tear, I don't really care what you're going to do the next season. I know that season's not going to be great, but I have to know that after that season, things are going to go up. I'm going to be very excited about them then. But after that ACL tear, you cannot expect anything great, because we've seen it multiple times where the other leg, the hamstring, something that's been helping out that ACL that has been getting rehabilitated, like, it just comes up. It's just an injury that reoccurs. And then after that year, you see them start to get better and better. So that's where I'm at with it too. I just feel like it's hard to put high expectations on these guys after coming off such a serious injury like this, even though it's easier to come back from now because all the medicine and whatnot, but you cannot expect these guys to just go crazy in 2023, in my opinion.
Chev, close this show out for us. Who are you avoiding?
No, it's going to be Kenneth Walker. I actually really like Kenneth Walker. I loved where he went last season. Now, the tough part is that they add Zach Charbonnet in the second round. Then they go out and add JSN. I mean, that really, really hurts me with his production, in my opinion. Zach Charbonnet is going to come in. He's going to do a lot in that offense, I think. I think in the red zone, he could be a pounder in there. And also, I think he's going to be a guy in the passing game that takes over a little bit of that responsibility there too, because he is a good pass blocker and he's a good receiver out of the backfield. So I think that really hurts Kenneth Walker's stock to start off. Just those 2 guys alone have been great. And, you still got DK Metcalf. You have Tyler Lockett. There's still plenty of good wide receiver grouping there as well. So I think that really hurts Kenneth Walker's stock this upcoming year. There's just a lot of mouths to feed in that offense. And I think Zach Charbonnet is going to cut into his production this upcoming year. If you want Kenneth Walker, you have to give up 2 firsts to get him. I don't think I've seen anything less than that at this point. Maybe you can get him for a first and a second, but I just see 2 firsts in a lot of the trades that I've been looking at. I still think he'll have a decent season. Last year, I believe he finished as like RB 18, which it's all right. It's not great, but RB 18 is fine. I think I see him in the same area this upcoming year from 17 to 24, somewhere in that range, just because of all the production that he might lose with these guys coming in. And I just don't know what he's going to get in the receiving world. I just don't. They didn't like throwing to him in the first place. He didn't have a whole lot of receptions going into the end of this year. I know he had a few games with touchdowns and a lot of touches where he had 23 touches, I believe, in 3 of the last 4 games, but there was no receiving work, it didn't seem like. So I would rather have Najee Harris this upcoming year. Last offseason, got hurt literally the first padded practice. And then his foot was just all janky with the Liz Frank sprain. It was not good. I think somebody said he had a screw in his foot as well. So it must have just been a painful first few weeks of the season. And he did not look like himself. But in 2023, I have hope. They beefed up the O-line that was just miserable last year. Kenny Pickett, Mike's boy, should be a little more comfortable in this offense now. There's plenty of weapons on the outside, too, to open up lanes in the running game. He's going to have more touches as well than Kenneth Walker rushing alone. And I think we could see Najee come back again this upcoming year and get 50 receptions. I know last year he didn't hit that, but I believe he had 70 plus in his first season in the NFL. I think we'll get back to seeing Najee getting the football a lot in that offense. And I think that's going to be why I really want him over Kenneth Walker at this point for 2023, because Najee's going to get that workload. And I'm not sure Kenneth Walker is going to get that entire workload in that offense. So that's why I'm kind of staying away from Kenneth Walker and going with Najee here. I expect Najee to return to be an RB1. Like I said, he's going to catch more than 50 passes. That puts you in a good spot. Look at Ramondre Stevenson. We just talked about him. Had 60-plus receptions last year. Top 10 running back. It's easy to get into that zone if you can rush the football for 1,000 yards, which Najee can do, and he can get those 50 catches. It's very easy to get there once you can get those receptions in these offenses. And you can get him for a single first at this point. Everybody's down on Najee thinking he had a bad year, but at the end of the season, Najee was a different running back. Najee was making plays. Najee looked better. He didn't look like he was super injured at the end of the year. Hopefully he can be in a good spot this upcoming year and stay injury-free.
Chev's right, by the way. Kenneth Walker last year, 27 catches for 165 yards. Goose egg in the touchdown column, whereas Najee Harris, in what we think was a down year, 41 catches for 229 yards and 3 touchdowns. So we don't really think of Najee Harris as a receiving back per se, but if you're in a PPR format, there's 41 extra points right off the rip just on receptions. So definitely a good thing to have. 74 catches his rookie season, so he can do it. And I will also take Najee over Kenneth Walker.